In the face of a continuing global financial crisis, companies are finding it more important than ever to both adhere to their core values and to emphasize the importance of innovation in their products and services. Infosys is no exception. Gopalakrishnan, CEO and Managing Director of the Bangalore-based IT giant, was on campus last week to deliver a Wharton Leadership Lecture. Shortly before his presentation, he spoke with Wharton Management Professor Saikat Chaudhary about a range of issues, including the impact of the credit crisis, the role of acquisitions in the company's overall strategy, the nature of the competition, and the ways in which Indian multinational corporations are making unique contributions to the global marketplace.
Thank you very much for coming here, Mr. Gopalakrishnan. It's such a pleasure to have you here at Wharton, and my personal pleasure to be able to have a conversation with you about Infosys and the dynamics, growth strategies, the world, and how you might see yourself. I hope you've had a pleasant visit so far, and I thought of just first starting by asking you, what is your vision for Infosys?
See, the vision for the company has not changed from when it was started. The vision was to create a respected corporation operating in global markets, providing the best of breed solutions to our customers using best-in-class people. So that vision has not changed, and that will continue to be the vision for the company. For us, the notion of a respected corporation is what is driving all the things we do. It allows us to focus on being world class. It allows us to focus on providing the best return to our investors, being the best employer there is, and providing the best services to our clients.
And how do you achieve that? I mean, that's a grand vision, a very multifaceted one. How do you plan to achieve it?
So every aspect, every aspect of the company is touched by that vision. So I'll give you just one example. Every year, you have budgets being prepared for the company and things like that. And now, as part of that exercise, we ask every single department within the company to actually come up with 2 ideas, which will change the way they do things. It will have to have an impact on, let's say, the growth or the cost, efficiency, the brand, the positioning. So they must come up with 2 big ideas, every department. For example, in the annual report, we ask, what are the changes you're going to make to the annual report so that it continues to improve? Or in terms of infrastructure and facilities, what are the things you're going to do differently this year than last year? So that forces the entire company to think of continuous improvement, entire company to continuously innovate and look for better and better returns and things like that. So that's one of the ways we make sure that we implement this.
So innovation obviously is very much at the core and of this whole thing, both in process but also in product perhaps, right?
Innovation, being seen as a leader, trying to come out with best practices or next practices. So all that is part of this.
Where do you see your company going in terms of the products and services that it offers? I mean, I know that beyond the IT and IT-enabled services, we've seen a foray into BPO. That's slowly becoming knowledge process outsourcing, but we also see you dabbling in consulting and in R&D services, obviously much more higher-end types of services that you're targeting, and increasingly complex ones, I imagine, ones where you need closer interaction with your clients. What do you think will be the focus of your efforts?
So in one dimension, the focus is to expand the footprint, broaden the set of services. It allows us to have larger relationship with our clients. It allows us to cross-sell multiple products and services to our clients and create new engines of growth. It also expands the addressable market. So clearly we have much larger market to address, and so create growth in growth opportunities and things like that. It also allows us to engage with the customer earlier and earlier on with, for example, consulting. It allows us to engage with the business side of our customer through our business process outsourcing and things like that. So that is the one let's say one level of growth in services and things like that. The second level of growth in services is to make sure that we continuously look at multiple entry points, it enhances our sales capability and things like that. And over time, I see Infosys having 3 different let's say line of business or services. One is the ability to help our clients transform, change, look at their new initiatives and things like that. So that's the consulting, the development and things like that. It will be more transactional. It has a separate business model. The second is helping them in their business operations. So maintenance, BPO, infrastructure management, long-term relationships, long-term contracts. Maybe price is a major factor in determining the service and things like that. The third is intellectual property based solutions, products and things like that. Finacle is an example of that. Finacle is one of the leading core banking or universal banking solution in the world today, and we are selling it to banks around the world. So there are 3 sets of businesses.
It sounds like a fascinating vision, because what you're also doing is covering both peripheral but also gradually getting towards the core of activities that companies provide, and perhaps helping to redefine how corporations even think about themselves and operate as you go for this. If I hear you thinking about these areas, both the back-end types of operations, which are sometimes more peripheral in nature, but then also some of the key intellectual property-driven innovation type of areas which clients might want to pursue, tapping into expertise that you might be able to offer in that process. Very, very fascinating. How do you see yourself differentiating yourself from the other competitors, either Indian providers or the providers more globally, and which do you see, if I may ask, as the primary competitors in that endeavor?
So today we have 2 sets of competitors. One is the global system integrators. They are the consulting companies, or they are the larger players out there today. And second set of competitors are other Indian companies, especially the larger Indian companies. And what is happening in the industry is, because the models are converging, all of us are actually converging to the same space. And the competition is amongst us actually. By and large now, we see probably 5 or 6 companies whom we compete most often, and that's the set we are looking at. What is happening in the industry is that there's a new leadership being created, and all of us are actually competing to be seen as the leader in the industry. It actually gives us an opportunity for positioning Infosys very differently. The way we compete, there are several levels at which we compete. The knowledge we have of a particular industry, the solutions we have for that industry, that's one level of competition. The second is the quality of service we deliver, the predictability, the ability to deliver solutions on budget, on time, etc. So that's the second level of differentiation of how do we compete. The third level is the quality of the people who are put on engagements, etc., and how knowledgeable they are, and how they're able to provide value to the clients, because it's a knowledge based service and things like that. And the next level is the investments we make in building solutions, tools, techniques, the models we bring. So for example, the global delivery model itself is a clear differentiator in this space. So similarly, in the software engineering, the CMMI model we have adopted, etc. So the tools, the techniques, the models, etc. So those are again how we compete. So there are multiple ways in which we can compete and differentiate.
And of course, the other Indian competitors like the TCSs and Wipros are also trying to do the same, right? But
no, see,
how do you say yourself setting yourself apart?
See, every company, of course, tries to position itself along these dimensions, etc. Now, how you deliver on these things, how well positioned you are, that's clearly how we differentiate. And we have tried to make sure that in all these dimensions we lead, or we try to lead. That's how we differentiate ourselves.
Oh, fascinating. And of course, the big three competitors one always talks about on the international realm are the IBMs, the EDSs, Accentures, for instance. Now, how are you going to build these capabilities? Because that was implicit in your comments. How are you going to build those capabilities that you do not yet possess? Of course, the ones you have, you can incrementally improve, but the ones that you don't yet possess, how do you go about building those capabilities?
Typically, we would build new capabilities organically. So we would recruit the relevant people with experience, conceptualize the solution, maybe conceptualize the solution slightly differently, because everything we do, we want to embed the global delivery model. We want to deliver the work from the best possible location with the best possible people. That's the underlying idea behind global delivery model. So we want to embed the global delivery model in everything we do. Once we have understood, once we have established a delivery model, then we can look at acquisition as a way to accelerate the growth of a particular service. Typically, we will not enter into a new service or a solution through an acquisition, because the acquired entity may not have the desired model or where we want to take the model to. If we find somebody like that, maybe we can start with an acquisition. So typically, you will find that we start something, we establish ourselves, and then we look at acquisition. Now, when it comes to intellectual property, of course, we can look at acquisition, and Finacle has acquired IP from outside, smaller companies, etc.
It makes sense to me. I mean, given your emphasis on building a model and a process around it, it's very hard, if that's not very well aligned with a potential target, to just bring in a target into that fold. So if you have established, let's call it a platform in a certain space to compete in it, then you can add on certain competencies in order to be able to leverage that platform further. It's very hard to bring in that platform and then get it to mesh with the existing corporation, especially because you have a unique culture, you have a process orientation, such a disciplined focus, and blending that, especially if it's a foreign company, is not very easy. And so we of course hear all these wild rumors every once in a while about potential targets that are not doing well and larger firms, but Infosys in particular, I think, has been very cautious in this thing. But doesn't this slow down your ability to grow to some extent, and find new avenues for growing at the double-digit type of rates that you're accustomed to?
So when you look at our growth rate and compare that with other companies, we've not been behind. We have actually had industry-leading growth rates. On an average, we have grown 35% over the last several years, compounded annual growth rate of 35%, which is an industry-leading growth rate for companies of our size. The reason why that is feasible, on one side, you have the market. Our market share is still less than 1% overall when compared to overall IT services spending. And on the other side, we have figured out how to create a supply chain, how we can recruit people, bring them into the company, bring them up to speed, train them, etc., and then make sure that they can fuel this growth, etc. And all this is done using an excellent business planning mechanism we have. So we have actually grown grown over the years, using an organic model. Now, acquisition we see as a way to fill strategic gaps, if there are any. Acquisitions we see as a way to enter new markets, because the service is there, but in order to enter a new market, you have to create some local delivery capabilities, for example, consulting capabilities or local language front-end capabilities, and that can be accelerated through acquisition. So that's probably one of the goals for acquisition. We have done one in Australia which fits this model.
So customers, geographic perhaps expansion, maybe even some domain expertise?
Yes, that's also possible. So for example, we can look at, let's say, healthcare or energy utilities. So those are the targets we would look at typically.
Speaking of the market, of course, the credit crisis and financial crisis is weighing heavily on everyone's minds, and I'm sure on yours as well to some extent. What do you think the impact will be on Infosys, on the Indian economy? Do you see much of an impact?
Clearly, there is an impact. Last year we grew 35%. This year we're looking to grow. Our projections are about 13 to 15%. So growth has slowed down. The IT services industry has slowed down in India. So there has been an impact. Overall, Indian economy also has seen an impact. From a GDP growth rate, projected GDP growth rate of 8-9%, it has dropped down to 7-8%, and maybe next year it will be somewhere around 7%. So GDP growth rate has slowed down. Capital has flown out of India, which has had an impact on the stock market and things like that. So overall, this has had an impact in India also.
So you do expect that growth will be a little slower over the next year, year and a half perhaps?
Growth would be slower, at least this year. It depends on how long it takes to recover and how long the recovery will take. Once I think stability comes, probably you will have a better understanding of the situation. We feel that once stability comes, once companies feel confident to look at let's say new projects, new initiatives, etc., then again we will see an opportunity to grow. Even in this environment, we are seeing opportunities to work with companies on M&A, integration type of work, etc., because a lot of companies have changed in terms of ownership. A lot of companies have merged and things like that. So that again gives us an opportunity for services.
And I noticed that you haven't certainly resorted to layoffs, but you're also not slowing your hiring really that much. And it makes sense to me. If this is a temporary phenomenon and there's always a battle for talent, may as well take advantage of the situation and continue bringing in and grooming those individuals so that when things pick up again more aggressively, you can deploy them accordingly, right? It's a longer term vision. Is that what how do we understand it?
We're still growing, right? 13-15% is still growth. So that's one aspect of it. Second is, in places like India, there is a challenge from a society perspective. If you look at layoffs and things like that, it's not seen very well. And then the pressure from society is significant. The pressure from government, it's not, the labor laws are not the constraint, but definitely the pressure from the government is there to say that don't resort to layoffs and things like that, because that creates impact on society and and the perception of people about business and things like that. So typically you will find that Indian companies do not resort to layoffs, etc. And in our case, because the business model is such that we're able to sustain our margins to a reasonable extent in spite of higher bench, lower utilization. We've decided to, at least for the time being, lower the utilization, but not worry about layoffs and things. And we are still recruiting.
Certainly, and I think new opportunities in the domestic market, perhaps in other geographic areas and the like, and as you keep on growing into new value-added services, they might be able to absorb those as well. So I can definitely see how you would still be able to do it. So for just a short-term thing, you would never risk even the ill will that might come as a result. And we saw airlines in particular trying to attempt to do something like that in India with pushback very quickly. Right. It makes sense. I mean, you don't need a long-term. If there was such a drastic situation where you would expect for the next 10 years the situation would be dire, then it makes sense to think about those things. But you can take a little bit of a short-term concession in this regard and still have longer-term impact. Fascinating. Just to close, I wanted to ask you, what do you think will be the hallmark of the emerging Indian multinational, if any? I ask because we see when the Japanese companies made their presence felt globally in the 80s, it was through a relentless focus on the supply chain, on just-in-time systems. That was one of the things they were known for. Is there anything you think that the Indian firms will be known for, can contribute to in terms of capability building and how corporations operate, management practices, and the like?
So Indian companies have focused on globalization of services. So that's definitely one of the contribution from Indian companies. You know, we have worked on it, fine-tuned it, and made sure that you're getting higher quality at lower costs and things like that, and at lower risk and things like that, high predictability, high quality and things like that. So that's definitely something Indian companies have contributed. Today, the same principle is getting applied across multiple service lines, multiple business processes and things like that. So that's one. The focus on process discipline and processes themselves again is something which Indian companies have contributed. Just like Japanese companies focused on manufacturing, Indian companies have focused on fine-tuning services. We were one of the first to take up the CMM model and accept as an industry best practice and things like that. So that's another contribution from Indian companies. The third third focus is really I think bringing in the concept of efficiency to a different level, cost to a different level, and then how you can leverage that cost as a growth driver or a growth engine. Now this I think is just starting to happen. When Indian companies compete, let's say a bank from India or a telecom company from India, because they have figured out how at much lower price points they can actually be more profitable, they can scale up and things like that. And then when they go international and start competing, other companies in the same industry will have to drop down to the same cost levels and figure out how to do that. So that I think is going to have a significant impact in the global economic environments around the world. If others do not bring in the same level of efficiency, what happens? These companies will have higher market caps, and these companies will start acquiring, right? And you have seen some of that also starting to happen. So these are some of the things which come to my mind from an Indian perspective.
Fascinating, and it really, if I may summarize those comments, it really seems to be that companies like Infosys are enabling the emergence of the modern distributed virtual corporation that operates and leverages upon global expertise 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whether internal expertise or external expertise. And you, of course, personify and embody that in how your organization is structured, but even for your client companies, that is how they're emerging and growing as they increasingly take on globalization and operate more as a cluster of centers of expertise as opposed to a centrally driven corporation. And I see that very much being enabled by companies like yourself. Thank you very much. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much for being here, Mr. Gopalakrishnan.